Now to the new interview set to air tonight with Monica Lewinsky, opening up about her affair with President Bill Clinton and revealing why she shared her secret with Linda Tripp.
Monica Lewinsky became famous overnight, earned 7 figures in a flash, and then watched the money vanish. Yet at 51, her net worth tells a different, uncomfortable truth about fame, power, and payoff. Did Bill Clinton's choices make her rich or cost her a fortune? Why does the public think she's worth $50 million when the receipts say otherwise? This is a story about deals won and lost, gaslighting on a grand stage, and how a woman turned humiliation into a working business model on her terms. Born into privilege, not riches. Monica Lewinsky's life began in an environment many would call privileged. But privilege is not the same as personal riches. She was born in San Francisco in 1973, and by the time she was old enough to notice, her family had already built a lifestyle that shimmered with Beverly Hills polish. Her father, Bernard Lewinsky, was a successful oncologist whose practice pulled in more than most families could dream of. Her mother, Marcia Lewis, had creative ambitions of her own and pursued a writing career. On the surface, it looked like the perfect formula for financial security and cultural belonging. Yet, behind the front gates of their Spanish-style mansion, cracks were forming that would shape Monica's relationship with money and fame in ways she never could have predicted. Growing up in Beverly Hills meant Monica was surrounded by symbols of wealth from an early age. The family lived in a home worth over $1 million in the 1980s, an amount that placed them firmly among Los Angeles's professional elite. Her father's practice generated around $400,000 a year, and the family spent freely. Vacations often cost $20,000. The driveway was home to luxury cars, and evenings included box seats at the symphony. Monica herself enjoyed the fruits of that prosperity. As a teenager, her parents paid $720 a month for tennis lessons, $300 for babysitters, and hundreds more for hairstyling. She attended private schools like Sinai Aqaba and John Thomas Dye, where classmates arrived in brand-new luxury cars on their 16th birthdays. Monica's world was polished, curated, and enviable from the outside looking in. Nevertheless, wealth does not always assure a successful outcome. The glitter and glamour concealed her parents' marriage, which was dissolving amid accusations and deep bitterness. The divorce in 1987 was a savage struggle. Monica's mother charged Bernard with infidelity and paying lavishly for the company of a mistress. Their arguments were often so heated that Monica would hear her father shouting obscenities at her mother all the way across the dinner table. The therapy bills mounted, and Monica herself had been seeing therapists for the expense. Their family money was spent not only on holidays and luxury, but also on emotional emergency treatment. It was ironic in a way. Monica's material circumstances spoke of abundance, while her home atmosphere shattered that illusion, teaching her that money cannot buy peace. The Beverly Hills bubble also created perceptions of her by others. Her classmates considered Monica one of the very rich and destined for great things. The teachers and students saw her as self-assured, exuberant, and expressive. Her yearbook entries spoke of grand ambitions and quoted Ezra Pound and Dr. Seuss in one breath. What went unnoticed was that the chaos in her domestic life had instilled in her a yearning for attention and approval. She learned early on that image was more important than truth. Years later, she'd go on tape to remark, "I was raised with lies. I have lied all my life." Behind that luxury of her upbringing lay a fragile foundation, and that would affect her decisions as a young woman moving toward adulthood. This backdrop stood, too, for public misapprehension some decades later. When the Clinton scandal broke, many supposed that Monica was financially secure and cushioned with family wealth. The opinion was that she could cash in on her last name and that her parents' funds would save her from ruin. The facts were different. Though her family was reasonably well off, Monica had little wealth of her own. When she walked into the White House as an intern, she had no independent fortune. She was comfortably supported, but not rich. Her parents' assets were theirs, not hers. This gap between perception and reality is one of the threads that shed light on why, despite the worldwide fame and million-dollar interviews, her net worth never ballooned into the figures that people like to imagine. Little did Monica know the White House internship she accepted in 1995 would change the course of her life, her reputation, and ultimately her bank account forever. The Oval Office connection. Monica Lewinsky arrived in Washington, D.C. in 1995 carrying little more than her psychology degree, a string of personal complications, and the connections of a well-placed family friend. That introduction landed her an unpaid internship at the White House under Chief of Staff Leon Panetta. She had no political resume, no long history of civic involvement, but in a city built on relationships and access, introductions counted for more than resumes. She joined at a moment of unusual instability. The federal government shut down in November of that year, sending most staff home. Interns, unpaid and eager, were asked to remain. Monica found herself among a skeleton crew in the West Wing. In that quiet, less crowded atmosphere, proximity became destiny. It was during those long days of government paralysis that she first crossed paths with President Bill Clinton. She was just 22. He was the 49-year-old leader of the free world. With so few staffers around, she stood out in hallways and offices where the president now appeared more often than usual. By chance or by design, their eyes met again and again. At a small birthday gathering inside the White House, Monica noticed her underwear strap visible above her pants. She didn't adjust it, and she saw the president notice. It was the kind of silent exchange that could either pass into nothingness or spark something far more complicated. In this case, it set the stage for a secret relationship that would alter not just her life, but American politics. The affair took off on November 15, 1995, and that day, the presidential schedules nearly matched each other as Monica entered the White House in the afternoon, returned that same evening, and didn't leave until past midnight, spurring encounters over the next 18 months that would be more than 9 times, usually either in or around the Oval Office. They're more than just flirtations. Clinton unbuttons her dress top to bottom, remembers her phone numbers, and phones her late at night just to say he misses her. Emotionally, and quite enough to deceive Monica into thinking she was more than just a casual fling, the relationship was also sexual. She saw herself as chosen, as more of a confidant than a lover. Gifts exchanged, little more than tokens to reinforce the illusion of intimacy. Monica bought Clinton designer ties, books, and even silly frog-themed trinkets. He gave her poems, stuffed animals, and cigars. One gift stood out, a framed photo of him wearing a tie she had given him. For a young woman just out of college, those tokens became validation. She was important to the most powerful man on earth. It was not only about the desire, it was acknowledgement. It blurred the lines for Monica between ordinary affection and the intoxicating draw of presidential attention. But then, some who were around the president did not consider it harmless. The White House staff saw how often Monica appeared in Clinton's orbit. Whispers circulated, eyebrows raised, and some aides felt uneasy. In April 1996, Deputy Chief of Staff Evelyn Lieberman acted and relocated Monica from the West Wing to a job at the Pentagon. Officially, she was said to have performed poorly and behaved badly, but unofficially, Everyone knew too well. She had gotten too close to the president. The transfer was meant to bring separation between the girl and her boss, but the distance did not sever the relationship. Phone calls continued. Emotional ties grew stronger, and sexual discussions followed suit. And as we'll see, it didn't. What began with late-night phone calls and whispered gifts would soon be captured on tape, dissected in courtrooms and broadcast across the globe. Tapes, trials, and impeachment. If the Oval Office connection was dangerous, the way it unraveled was catastrophic. Monica Lewinsky confided in an older co-worker at the Pentagon, Linda Tripp. And at first, Tripp played the role of a mentor and mother figure, someone Monica could lean on while still reeling from Clinton's rejection. But behind the warmth was calculation. Tripp secretly recorded more than 20 hours of phone conversations, capturing Monica's every confession. On those tapes were details of the affair, descriptions of gifts exchanged, late-night calls, and Monica's emotional turmoil. Monica thought she had found a friend. Instead, she had given prosecutors their strongest weapon. By January 1998, Monica signed an affidavit denying any sexual relationship with President Clinton. It was an attempt to shield him during the Paula Jones lawsuit, but it was also perjury. At the same time, she begged Tripp to lie as well, calling her repeatedly to ask for protection. Instead, Tripp went to the FBI. She handed over the tapes and even wore a wire during one final lunch at a Virginia mall, capturing Monica's words on government equipment. What Monica believed was private heartbreak was suddenly a matter of public record. Her voice, her vulnerabilities, and her secrets were now state evidence. On January 17, 1998, the story broke wide open when the Drudge Report leaked news of the president's alleged affair with a White House intern. Within days, Monica's name was plastered across worldwide headlines. The president, standing next to his wife, Hillary, looked into the cameras and denied it flatly. "I did not have sexual relations with that woman, Miss Lewinsky." The phrasing was cold, deliberate, and devastating. He never said her first name. To him, she was reduced to that woman. His lawyers leaned on narrow definitions of sexual relations, excluding anything oral so that technically his denial was defensible. But in the public mind, and for Monica, it was equivalent to a betrayal, gaslighting on a national stage. The case sped through the investigation. Monica was staring at the terrible prospect of criminal charges for perjury and obstruction of justice. She had perjured herself and had conspired with Tripp to draft remarks that could be construed as further obstruction. The prosecution was pushing very hard, and in July of 1998, prosecutors offered her an unusual deal: transactional immunity. If she told the entire truth, then she'd be immune from prosecution. At the young age of 25, she was forced to choose between prison and public disgrace. She chose to testify. Her testimony, corroborated by Tripp's tapes and, of course, the famous blue dress, savagely closeted Clinton. For the first time, he confessed under oath on August 17, 1998, to inappropriate relationship actions with Monica Lewinsky. The meaning of his word games became fodder for late-night comedians, but the stakes behind the laughter were in real life deadly serious. Perjury and obstruction of justice charges were being drafted against him. In December 1998, the House voted to impeach the president based on his lies and attempts to influence his testimony. As we'll see, the paydays that followed came fast and disappeared just as quickly. The paydays that vanished. After the impeachment storm, Monica Lewinsky faced a paradox. She was one of the most recognizable names in America, yet she had no career, no steady income, and no privacy. To the outside world, It seemed obvious she could cash in. She was offered millions to tell her story in interviews, books, and media appearances. And at first, she did. In 1999, she sat down with Barbara Walters for an ABC special that became the most-watched news interview in television history. 70 million viewers tuned in, nearly half the country's TVs. Advertisers paid more than 4 times the usual rate for commercial slots. The network raked in millions. Monica, however, received a one-time payday of about $1 million for the rights. For most people, that's life-changing money. For Monica, it was survival, quickly eaten up by taxes, legal fees, and the costs of simply existing under constant scrutiny. There, however, income as interview matter wasn't. The opposite issue of control was more the interview subject. Monica apologized to Hillary and Chelsea Clinton. She got hit with some hard questions, the self-issues about self-respect, maybe even about the kind of underwear, possibly thong, she wore. Yet, of course, the public wanted details. Monica gave them enough about herself to keep her name alive, but not enough for them to rewrite the tale. Financially, it was by far her biggest earning in a single interview. However, it could not provide her with a sense of stability. When the cameras stopped rolling, she remained Monica Lewinsky, the young woman branded that woman. It was not an establishment, it was a band-aid. In the same year, she published Monica's Story, the memoir co-authored with journalist Andrew Morton, who had gained notoriety for his biography on the late Princess Diana. The reported advance for the book was somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000 a fortune by any standards. The book opened at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, with Monica's name plastered across bookstores the world over. The content not only exceeded the contents of the Star Report, but was an exposition about her private troubles, such as her pregnancy termination and her therapeutic sessions. It became quite personal, at times uncomfortably so. Sales went strong, but again, the income was front-loaded. Advance payments were not royalties. Once the money was collected on an advance, there would be no more cash unless sales were so good that the royalties overturned the initial lump sum. Given taxes and lawyers and living, it dwindled down faster than any outsider thought. One of the biggest misconceptions regarding Monica Lewinsky is that she suddenly became fabulously rich. Most tabloids and websites repeat the number up to $50 million, but that is baseless. In fact, her actual income from the Walters interview and the Morton book comes to less than $1.5 million before deductions. Add in litigation expenses, years of therapy, and the resulting difficulty of finding even temporary employment under constant public ridicule, and the picture is slight at best. Instead of independence, Monica had an uncomfortable truth. Notoriety tends to pay in short spurts, but very seldom builds long-lasting wealth. Securing offers had slowed down after that initial flurry. Interviewers wanted her to get their ratings, and not so much for a contract duration. Publishers would have their headline book and move on to the next star scandal. She was a commodity, not a partner. Every opportunity becomes one of transaction, with every check being preceded by the reminder that the world wasn't interested in Monica Lewinsky the person, only Monica Lewinsky the scandal. That was the reality whereby she could not turn fame into the kind of long and sustained fortune people assumed. But if the million-dollar interview showed how fast money could vanish, the next round of endorsements and TV deals would prove that notoriety could be even more expensive. Deals, brands, and reality TV. If the interview and book money provided a lifeline, the next wave of opportunities looked like they could finally stabilize Monica Lewinsky's finances. Marketers saw her name as both infamous and unforgettable, and television executives believed her notoriety guaranteed ratings. But what seemed like a chance at reinvention often collapsed under the weight of public backlash. Instead of becoming the launchpad for a new career, many of these deals ended up as expensive disappointments. One of the biggest examples came in early 2000, when Monica signed a reported $1 million contract with Jenny Craig. The weight loss company saw her as a relatable figure for stressed, modern women trying to balance image, health, and identity. The deal required Monica to lose 40 pounds in 6 months, with a national ad campaign ready to roll. For a brief moment, the gamble looked like a hit. Jenny Craig pumped more than $7 million into marketing, plastering her face across magazines and TV spots. Although backlash came almost immediately, some franchise owners refused to carry the advertisements. Monica is no one to represent the brand, they submitted. She was a scandal figure who should not be associated with the brand. Public debate raged on whether she should profit from her notoriety. Within months, an abridged version of the contract was produced. Monica walked away with just $300,000 for that EAE, barely a third of the original promise. Another sharpening lesson: her name caught attention, but attention did not always translate into income. Not ready to concede defeat, Monica transitioned into entrepreneurship. In 1999, she set up The Real Monica Inc. for a handbag line she personally designed. It was by no means a lazy celebrity licensing deal. She traveled to Louisiana for the production oversight and had hands-on work in design and insistence on quality. The bags got into the likes of Henri Bendel in New York, Fred Siegel in Los Angeles, and even the Cross in London. The fashion press began to write about the bags instead of the scandal, giving her credit for the details. For a brief moment, Monica was accepted as a designer. But running a fashion enterprise requires more than favorable publicity. The tainted image attached to the name limited its customer base, and the company was not able to scale beyond an interesting novelty. The handbag line would eventually fade over the next few years, remembered more as a curiosity than for commercial success. Next for her was a major transformation in television. Fox had hired Monica in 2003 as the host of Mr. Personality, a strange mixture of a dating program with full masked male contestants. The show was purposely a spectacle, and Monica was the bait. Viewers were drawn in by curiosity. It opened up to quite a strong rating upon its debut. Critics even say she is charming on the live camera, confident, and engaging as a host. For a while, it seemed as if she had found a new career route, but the novelty wore off fast. The audience condemned her for profiting from the scandal. Ratings very soon plummeted, and cuts made by the network reduced the finale from 2 hours to 1. After 5 episodes, Mr. Personality was history. Monica had proved that she could handle television, but, once again, her reputation limited how far she could go. And that moment came years later, when she transformed from a tabloid punchline into a serious voice on shame, bullying, and survival. From shame to storyteller. By the mid-2000s, Monica Lewinsky had stepped back from the public eye. The quick bursts of income from interviews, books, endorsements, and television had faded, and so had the appetite for her as a tabloid fixture. What remained was a woman in her 30s who had been branded for life, unable to secure traditional employment because her name carried scandal into every job interview. For almost a decade, she lived quietly, splitting her time between the United States and abroad, trying to escape the shadow of a story that wouldn't die. Yet even in retreat, she knew she couldn't hide forever. To survive, she would eventually have to reclaim her story. The turning point came in 2014 with an essay in Vanity Fair titled "Shame and Survival." 16 years had passed since the scandal, and Monica chose her words with precision. She declared it was time to burn the beret and bury the blue dress, signaling her readiness to move beyond symbols of humiliation that had defined her life. In the essay, she opened up about the trauma she had endured, the thoughts her mother had feared, and the impossibility of living with constant ridicule. Things had altered much around the world since 1998. Public shaming had quite an impressive platform in the social media world. Through her story, Monica made a statement not as the scandal figure, but as a trailblazer, patient zero, of digital humiliation. The essay went viral and even took the discourse on empathy, bullying, and the cruel economics of shame. Betrayed by scorn, she joined the world's most famous public speaking act the following year. Her TED Talk, entitled The Price of Shame, had over 20 million viewers and became one of the most talked about presentations in 2011. In a mere 20 minutes, Monica reframed herself from tabloid scandal to cautionary tale. It rather argued that the culture of public shaming was becoming more dangerous with the coming of the internet, leaving victims who couldn't run away from their mistakes. Standing on that stage, she was now no longer an intern whom they could whisper about in the hallways of Washington. She was a survivor, a truth-teller, and an advocate. The effect was tremendous. Universities invited her to lecture. Nonprofits were calling to partner. For the first time, her financial gains were not from repeating a scandal, but from delivering an intergenerational message. More than public speaking, however, her role as 2018 saw Monica in the documentary The Clinton Affair, during which time she shared her side of the scandal for a new generation audience who had only heard its history. Then, in 2021, she was a producer on FX's Impeachment, American Crime Story, a dramatized retelling of the Clinton Affair. This time, she would not be the subject without agency. She would be a decision-maker in the dynamic of how her story would now be presented to millions. Something the critics said was brave and necessary, and lent credence to the series while allowing Monica to regain control over how she would be considered. The same year, she co-produced the HBO Max documentary 15 Minutes of Shame. The project examined cases of online shaming around the world, linking her own story to a larger cultural question. It became not only about what happened to her in the 1990s, it became about what happens to anyone placed in the eye of mass ridicule in the digital age. As an executive producer, Monica brought more than just her name. She brought her experience, her voice, and her viewpoint. It was not tabloid material, but social commentary. And for once, she was being paid not as the subject of gossip, but as a professional in the entertainment business. Yet even after reclaiming her story on stage and on screen, 2025 would demand a bolder step, one where Monica finally confronted the man at the center of it all: reckoning and real net worth. By 2025, Monica Lewinsky had lived with her name in headlines for nearly 3 decades. She had endured ridicule, rebuilt her voice, and established herself as a storyteller on her own terms. But this year, at age 51, she showed the world that her reckoning wasn't finished. In February, she sat down for a raw interview on Call Her Daddy, the hit podcast hosted by Alex Cooper. What she said in that conversation reframed the scandal yet again and reignited debate over accountability. With calm but pointed clarity, Monica declared that Bill Clinton should have resigned from the presidency back in 1998. She explained that the right way to handle the situation would have been to admit the relationship was nobody's business and step down rather than deny it and throw her under the bus. For the first time in years, she placed the responsibility squarely on him in public, saying his actions were far more reprehensible than her own mistakes. She described his infamous televised denial, "I did not have sexual relations with that woman," as gaslighting on a grand scale. The language, the distancing, the refusal even to say her name had cut her deeply at the time. Now, decades later, she explained how that denial didn't just damage her reputation. It defined her as a national joke for an entire generation of women who watched her torn apart for her sexuality and her errors. In the interview, Monica admitted she had made mistakes, but she emphasized that it was Clinton's responsibility, as the most powerful man in the country, to never put her in that position. The fact that he had never apologized to her directly underscored the imbalance that shaped the entire scandal. This fresh candor coincided with Monica's newest venture, her podcast, Reclaiming. She has partnered with Wondery to put the recording out weekly in both audio and video format, and sit down with guests about the idea of reclaiming what has gotten lost or stolen. In her premiere episodes, the guests were Olivia Munn on silencing in Hollywood, Kara Swisher on public scrutiny in tech, and Molly Ringwald about navigating fame, each visitation echoing Monica's experience, but not entirely singularly focused on her. Rather, it was meant to create a space for others to share their stories of survival and restoration. In interviews for the podcast, Monica said she wanted it to be a safe harbor, a place where one can be vulnerable without the fear of being judged. She joked that maybe she was the last person to start a podcast, but she admitted it finally felt like the right moment. This was not another celebrity podcast, but something that Monica herself sees as an extension of her lifelong efforts to turn pain into purpose. After a life of definitions by others, Monica had finally assumed control of the narrative. Her guests, her topics, her framing. This time, the business side favored her too. As producer and host, she got ownership stakes that gave her financial and creative power. It wasn't a seven-figure advance handed over once and spent. It was a model for steady, long-term growth in incomes that didn't depend on shock value, but on trust, credibility, and audience loyalty. In terms of her finances, it is a reality that may not be very encouraging, but is nonetheless unmistakable. After decades of fame, Monica is estimated to have a net worth of about $1.5 to $2 million. She is definitely not the multi-millionaire of tabloid fantasy. The ailing myths of $50 million fortunes floating around online just fall apart under scrutiny. Yes, she earned $1 million for her Barbara Walters interview. Yes, she made $500,000 for her memoir. But that swallowed it all in taxes, legal fees, living expenses, and so forth. All endorsement deals shrank under backlash, TV projects fizzled, and business ventures stalled. Only in recent years, through speaking engagements, production credits, and now her podcast, has she built a sustainable income. Her wealth is modest compared to the fantasy, but it is real, earned, and carefully guarded. If you want more deep dives that separate rumor from receipts, like, comment, and subscribe. Tell us, do public apologies change bank accounts or only headlines? And do not miss the next video on screen now, where we follow another scandal-era figure whose real earnings will surprise you.